Gratitude is a funny thing. It can be a feeling or an intention or an attitude. But gratitude takes on a whole new depth of meaning when it's a practice. Performing regular acts of gratitude takes something abstract and makes it concrete. And these acts reinforce themselves over and over until the experience of gratitude becomes something far more meaningful, far more enriching than a feeling or an intention or an attitude. In this episode, we'll introduce you to someone whose gratitude toward Vietnam veterans is a matter of regular, intentional practice. She has turned "thank you for your service" into a lifestyle. Because if it hadn't been for Vietnam veterans, she says, she might never have known freedom.
The deeds of service moved me. How they share the burdens of yearning for freedom for people who are not citizens of their country in places nobody heard of. My generations get to know freedoms because of their service.
Stick around. From the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, founders of The Wall, this is Echoes of the Vietnam War. I'm your host, Michael Crone, bringing you stories of service, sacrifice, and healing from people who still feel the impact of that conflict more than 50 years later. Episode 94, Practicing Gratitude. Right after this.
Hello, I'm Gary Sinise. Nearly 3 million Americans served in Vietnam, and more than 58,000 have their names inscribed on the wall. Those that pay the ultimate price in service to America. Some might ask why the Vietnam War still matters. It matters because more than 58,000 lives were cut short and their families forever changed. It matters because we should never forget how Vietnam veterans were treated when they came home. A lesson learned so that our current generation of veterans are treated with respect. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, the organization that built the wall, works to ensure that future generations will understand the war's impact. I'm asking you to help keep the promise the wall was built on. Never forget. Visit vvmf.org to find out how you can get involved.
If you've ever visited the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., you've seen them. The volunteers we affectionately refer to as the Yellow Hats because, well, they wear yellow hats and yellow shirts. These people dedicate their spare time to helping visitors find names on the wall, make rubbings, answer questions about the memorial, and just listen. If you're there just about any Saturday, you might notice one little group of yellow hats that stands out from the others. They stand out for two reasons. One, because they're a family, a mother, a father, and two young boys, ages 9 and 11. Those boys are, as far as I know, the youngest bona fide Yellow Hats on record. The other reason they stand out is because they are Vietnamese Americans.
Myself and my husband and our 2 sons usually come to the Vietnam Veteran Memorial on Saturday.
That's Hong Lee. Her father escaped Vietnam in the late 1980s by boat and was eventually able to bring the rest of his family, including Hong, to America. Since 2016, she and her husband Tao have been regular fixtures at the wall.
Occasionally we'll switch off and go on Sunday, but Saturday is the typical days. And 3 to 4 times a month. And we've been doing it for years. And very excited whenever we get to meet veterans. And it just an opportunity for us to take our sons and have them meet veterans. It just, we don't get to see them outside of the Vietnam Veteran Memorial.
I first met Hong at the wall about 5 years ago when I was there for a ceremony. I can't remember which one or what year, but I do remember her because on special occasions like the one where we met, Hong ditches her yellow hat and shirt and instead wears a traditional Vietnamese dress, which makes her stand out even more.
The yellow hat is when on typical Saturday is when we come there to volunteers. Then we wear our uniforms. But on special occasions like Memorial Days, Veterans Day, Father's Day, days that are more formal, a little bit more formal, then I would wear the white dress. This is a traditional uniform for students in Vietnam. And I know that many of the soldiers during the Vietnam War would be able to recognize the traditional dress. In fact, one Memorial Day, I was just walking up to the seat, and the veteran came up to me and said, "I haven't seen this in 50 years." So just to wear that so that it bring back the memories, the good memories for the veterans. So that's why I wear that. But otherwise, it's yellow hats and yellow shirts.
Despite having come to the United States at the age of 10, Hong was probably in her mid to late 20s when Vietnam veterans and their sacrifices first entered the front of her consciousness. She got involved with a group of Vietnamese Americans who, among other things, would lay wreaths at the memorial and ride along with Rolling Thunder. Her husband, Tao, was a member of that group, but she didn't know him very well then, except through a mutual friend in the group.
I met Tao's friends, which is one of the many young men in that organizations in 2008. And then he started to talk to me about the Vietnam Veteran Memorial. Many conversations. Tao was in that organization, but we don't talk. Tao is very quiet. So that friends and I were more in conversation about the Vietnam War, the Vietnam Veteran Memorial, what kind of things that they were doing. But in 2009, that friend died of leukemia. So that's when Tao and I, through his sickness and his funeral, we become close friends. And then eventually from that to marriage.
How long have you been married?
In 2012.
So you and Tao and your boys, you guys are spending 3 to 4 Saturdays or Sundays a month at the memorial, and you've been doing this for years. Can you talk about why this is so important to you?
Well, the deeds of service moved me. How they share the burdens of yearning for freedom for people around the world, for people who are not citizen of their country in place that so remote, so far away, in place that nobody heard of. They didn't have to do it. My generations get to know freedoms because of their service. And therefore, I think it's so little to devote our time like this to express our gratitude for what they given up.
Hong's journey to America began in 1987 when her father and older sister saw an opportunity to escape communist rule, and they took it.
They bought a small fishing boat and went to Thailand. hugging the coast of Vietnam into Thailand, and then entering the refugee camp there. And went through the whole process of interview for entering a third country. And he got accepted to America because his dad used to be a police officer before 1975.
Because of his connection to the Republic of Vietnam's government, he was perceived to be in some danger.
Yes. And so after 1975, every family is categorized into three different colors. The white background meant the family did not participate in either the South Vietnamese government or the revolutions. The black family background is if before 1975 they had participate, cooperate with Americans or the South Vietnamese government. And red family background is if the family has either support the revolution in some ways or actively members of the revolution have a red background. And that is how family get portions for food because everything is taken over by government and they control what to buy. So based on that background, you would have some like rewards for bigger portions or smaller portions.
I'm assuming that your family's background would be black.
Yes.
This would have been about 1987 when he left, and he's in Thailand. He's in the refugee camp there. How do you know how long he was there?
I believe he said that he arrived in America in 1988, maybe 1989, because once you arrive in Thailand and then you wait for the UN High Commission's delegation to come do the interview, and then once that was done, then you get accepted to a third country, then they go to Philippines for 6 months to learn the English language before going to America. So I think it might be 1989.
Yeah. But your sister would have been with him.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what the mechanisms are for somebody in your father's position to get his remaining family out of Vietnam. I don't know if he had a plan, if it was just hope for the best. Do you have a sense of what he thought his chances would be when he left of getting you and your mother out of there?
I can't tell what is on his mind, but all I know is that my mother said I was way too young. If something happened and they have to run, and if there's shooting, the chance of me escaping is very little. And then adding to it, it would cause more obstacle for him if danger come about.
I'm sure it was widely known that he had escaped. What effect did that have on your experience?
I remember that we moved because I was born in Long Tan. That's when we were living with him and his family, my paternal grandfather. But then when he left, we moved to Cam Ranh where my grandmother was living. So I can't remember any issues except school can be a little bit difficult.
Can you talk more about that?
Well, there would be like little mocking here and there within school, names calling like you're close to Americans, things like that. It's like a mockery.
But there was no official reaction from the state against you and your mother after your father and sister escaped.
No.
How much do you know about your father's experience once he got to America? What was it like for him to try and get you and your mother to join him?
It's I don't think it wasn't long after that he got my mom and I over. So it was as long as he started to go to school, having a stable job, then he was allowed to sponsor my mom and I over. And I think this is paperwork would probably start in 1991 and then come over in 1992. So things have been loosened up a little bit. And there were many other programs that allow Vietnamese to leave the country by this time.
Okay. Those programs didn't exist necessarily when he left.
No. But
Okay.
I think it started in the 90s because like my husband, he came over in 1992 and the program was Emiratia. So I think it seems like around the same time, many programs enable Vietnamese to come to America legally.
Yeah. The U.S. officially normalized relations with Vietnam in July 1995.
But I think officials already went over there and start the conversation before that, because I remember listening to the senators during the Vietnam Veterans Day saying that things are starting to open up. And I think he said it was 1991. So things are loosening up.
Got it. How much longer was it before you and your mother joined him in the United States?
We came in October of 1992.
Were you in Iowa?
Yes,
Where in Iowa?
Des Moines.
Des Moines, Iowa. Wow, that's a big change. You said October?
Yes.
October in Des Moines, Iowa has got to be way different than October in Cameron.
I'm sure that's how the soldier felt when they stepped off the airplane into Vietnam.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good point. What do you remember about leaving Vietnam, and what do you remember about arriving in Des Moines?
Lots of going back and forth with paperwork. Because I was living in the rural area of Cam Ranh, so it's not like over here where you get to travel from state to state. That's like my first time getting out of Cam Ranh. So we traveled to Saigon for paperwork, and then once we board the airplane coming over here, it's such a shock to see so many lights, so many buildings, because when I was in Vietnam, in Cam Ranh, there's no electricity. And then now here, probably walking to get from one place to another in Vietnam, and then coming here in an airplane. I was stuck in the bathroom on the airplane when I was on there. In terms of technology, it was just way more advanced than my imagination, and I didn't know if I would be able to adapt to this new environment.
I wonder if you had any sense of whether it was difficult for your mother. Do you remember how she felt making that journey with you?
She was apprehensive, but she was very happy to be joining my dad again, to have the family come together again. But like everything just seems very strange, and even to relationships. She haven't seen each other for so long, and for us living in a different environment, and then my dad living in this, the cultures differences, even though it's only a few years, it's I think she was telling me that she was happy and excited to see him, but when it comes to the real meetup, it was awkward.
How did you guys go about settling in Des Moines, and what sort of patterns emerged in your life?
Well, schooling is probably the most significant experience for me as a young person. Um, I was scared being someone who come from another place, don't know what it would be like. Do they have family background in this country? And then I don't know the language. But once I enter school, that's the first time I see people with different color, like yellow, white, black. And yet we sat in the same table and speaking the same language and sharing food. And the teacher was really kind. She was able to help me integrate into the classroom. And that feeling of apprehensions and scare just went away. I didn't know when, but it went away.
So the
And
people of Des Moines made you feel at home.
they did.
Mm.
And, and it's so weird because sometimes even when I don't know much besides saying hi, hello, how are you doing? And yet I felt like I can communicate with them.
Mm. And how did the family spend its time when you weren't in school?
Usually going over to, he has a sponsor when he first come to America, and that family, then he would introduce us to that family, and that family would have a little get together on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And Sunday we would just go to church. And in the summer, sometimes we go apple pickings, farm life.
Did you get involved in activities at school?
No, that would mean my parents have to take me, and they were busy working. And so outside of that I was just mainly in school, and then bus was my big transportation.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you know what sort of work your parents found in Des Moines?
My mom was doing more like blue collar factory works. So whichever one that is available. But I think that time, many companies must have had some kind of incentive to help the Vietnamese refugees. So they would accept a lot of Vietnamese to the company. And those who came before, they would help the newer one to learn the work. And it just all worked by hand. So just the initial introduction doesn't take a lot to orient. And those are the kind of, you go from company to company depending on how long it lasts. My dad, at that time, there was a program that helped the newcomers to go to school. So he was able to have went to trade school and become a electrical technician.
Oh, wow. I'm curious if you ever heard from your father or from your sister any stories or details about what that boat ride was like from Vietnam to Thailand.
I didn't ask them too much about it because by the time I was more aware and become more mature to learn about the Vietnam War, we don't have too many conversation anymore. And my sister, she doesn't remember much. So I didn't ask them.
How old do you think you were when you first started to understand the enormous risk that your father had taken?
It has to be once I start doing more activity with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial.
After a short break, Hong has something she wants to say to all of the Vietnam veterans out there and their families. And I think you should hear it. Stick around. Let's talk about the wall for a minute. It is widely considered to be the memorial that changed memorials forever. Its design invites a level of engagement, of introspection, of reverence that no fountain, no statue of a cannon or a man on a horse could ever match. The volunteers who work there often talk about wall magic, that unexpected, often spiritual connection or discovery that happens when you visit the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It's one of the reasons why the wall's design has inspired so many other memorials around the world. Of course, there is one little problem with the wall's design. 140 panels of polished black granite aren't exactly portable. So, unless you can get yourself to Washington, D.C., how are you supposed to experience wall magic for yourself? Well, guess what? We already thought of that. In 1996, VVMF unveiled an exact replica of the wall that could be packed into an 18-wheeler and hauled to cities and towns all across America. Since then, the Wall That Heals has been displayed in more than 800 communities throughout the nation, spreading the healing legacy of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial to millions of visitors. Sure, there are other versions of the wall that travel around the country, but the Wall That Heals is the only one that is an exact replica of the one in Washington, created and maintained by the same organization that built the wall in the first place. And not only that, the Wall That Heals is accompanied and curated by VVMF employees who work with host communities to ensure that the experience is as close as possible to the real thing. And that includes wall magic. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can check out episode 15 of this podcast to learn what happens to people's hearts when this traveling exhibit rolls into a real-life American community. The Wall That Heals and the mobile education center that travels with it will be in D'Iberville, Mississippi, April 10 through 13, and Whiteville, North Carolina, April 24 through 27. To see the rest of this year's tour schedule and to learn how you can bring the Wall That Heals to your town, visit vvmf.org. And now back to my conversation with Hong Lee. I want to go back to the memorial and talk a little bit more about your interactions there with veterans. You know, in the years that you've been doing this, are there any particular interactions that you've had with veterans that really left a mark, that you still think about, that really stand out to you as extraordinary?
One of the first interaction I had when I first became a volunteer was a veteran that came down the wall, and I just give thanks to him. He came with honor flight, I believe. I give thanks to him, shake his hand, and then he just starts sobbing, crying.
What did you say to him that moved him?
It was just a gratitude. It is as if he haven't heard it or haven't heard it from someone who came from the place where he served, Republic of Vietnam. And then over the years, those kind of encounter become pretty almost common. After I give them gratitude, they would share with me their stories. I believe what really moves them is to come to an understanding that their service make a difference. It wasn't in vain. And I want to read one of the email. The interaction didn't leave that much of an impact. In fact, I don't know if he understand what I said, but his brother asked me for my email. And then his brother went home and sent me this email. Can I read it?
Please.
It said, "Hi, we met today at the wall. I was the one you put your info in my phone. You have single-handedly changed both our lives forever. My brother, the veteran, he said this was very best day of his life. Thank you so much for sharing your words and making all the difference to him from here forward. In his life, Vietnam will no longer haunt him forever. Thank you seemed hardly big enough of a response." And he said, "All the best." Signed his name. Something with the interaction and the conversation that it's instantly heal them. And that's why they would send something like this, that it's beyond my understanding. But it's moved me. It encouraged me to come to the Vietnam Veteran Memorial and work harder, try to perfect my language, the way I communicate with them better, so that they can see and understand their hearts better.
Yeah. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think is important?
There is a message that I want to send to the soldiers who serve, the aunts and uncle on the Vietnam Veteran Memorial, and to the families, and even to those who haven't understand and may have think or hear listening to the opinions about the Vietnam War, laboring names to the aunts and uncle on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, saying things as if they caused the war. I just asked them to come to the Vietnam Veteran Memorial, have an open heart, and look to the names of the aunts and uncle on there, and to envision themselves at the age of 18, 19 years old, what they have given up, their futures, their happiness, their families, and even their life, so that they can share the burdens of yearning for freedom for people that they don't know in a land far away. Just look at those names and then think back of what they've heard and hear, and think for themselves. Would someone who have given up all that to do what the contrary belief is, or the popular opinion is that the act of love is within the definition of sacrifice. And would an act of invasions or causing war be measured up by the definition of sacrifice? I think if they come to the wall and open their hearts, they would be able to receive their service and their sacrifice. And for me, my prayer and my hope is, and I believe that with the advance in technology today, the young generations from within Vietnam will know where to look for freedoms. They can compare for themselves and know where freedom comes from. And then they can choose for themselves what they want in the future. And I believe when that day comes, honors will be restored to our aunts and uncles on the wall.
Do you feel like there's still work to be done in that area?
I think they respect the veterans, but they haven't come to fully understand what they did for. And especially from within the country, I have real hope for them because the interaction that I had with the young generation from within the country, they seem to be receptive of the soldiers when they come to the Vietnam Veteran Memorial. And I hope they go a little bit further to receive their service for their freedoms. And then maybe heading toward foundations of the rule of law in the futures. The one thing I want to say when it comes to the Vietnam Veteran Memorial, and that I really like being there, is I think it healed me from being someone who, in a sense, young and indifferent, not understanding or not caring that the freedom that I have and the life that I had wasn't there readily available. Someone had to make that sacrifice in order for me to inherit the freedom that I have today. And it's starting from the the founders of this country, and the many who gave their lives since. And so being at the Vietnam Veteran Memorial healed me from ingratitude to having a grateful heart. And I'm thankful for that. And I hope that my children would grow up with that heart of gratitude and to learn from the aunts and uncle for their service, their sacrifice, and their courage.
I think it's so wonderful that you call them aunts and uncles.
They are.
Do you remember when you started doing that?
The moments I know what they did. Such a respect for things. So I always refer to them as aunts and uncles.
And that's a term of respect?
Respect and gratitude.
Our sincere gratitude to Hong for sharing her story and her sentiments with us, and for everything she does at the memorial. If you're ever at the wall on a Saturday or a Sunday in need of good medicine, keep an eye out for her. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more stories of service, sacrifice, and healing. See you then.
'Cause I got you. 'Cause I got you. 'Cause I got you.